Hey, brother.
What's going on, Dave? Joe from Chicago.
I see that. You got the Bears going on there.
Yeah, hey, let me tell you something. Next time we meet, Chicago Bears 392, Texans 0.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not a Texans fan, so that'll be work for me.
I got a piece of sausage lodged in the lining of my heart. Makes about a baker's dozen for me.
So I'm loving the stash there, man.
How are you?
I'm good.
All right.
It it's hotter than hell down here. So it's still 100 degrees plus here.
Oh, we're at like 75 here in Chicago.
Oh, you can just kiss my ass.
So I saw you when I jumped on. I saw you were talking about the V cut, and actually that's probably going to be my favorite as well. Let me clear off this phone here.
You know, the D cut was my favorite cut for a long time, but I've kind of changed my paradigm. And just like I was talking with you talking with you the other day about changing the paradigm of and how we describe our cigars to instead of being bodied of and strength to boldness to bring them out. And I've got my caliber too.
Yes, I love it. This is my go-to cutter right here. You cannot mess this up.
You see, and there are certain types of cigars, so if I'm smoking a Corona, a Petite Corona, a Longsdale, a Lancero, I'm not going to use a V cut on that because that's
Right.
going to cut in too deep, and it's going to cut through my cap. And so that's what I was kind of talking about. So you can see I'm smoking the Gran Toronto 90 Noventa,
Okay. Tonight
and I know you got the Don V.
smoking the Don V. This is one of my first pairing review articles on Whiskey Network, the magazine that we both now write for. Congratulations on that, and
Thank you.
congratulations on your first publication. I
Thank
enjoyed
you. I appreciate
that. That was very excellent.
it. I hope you will enjoy my second one, which I submitted I sent in the article. But we're going to start exploring scotches. We're going to go.
Definitely. This Don V. This is in collaboration between Oscar Valladares in Honduras and Vic Shaw here in Chicago at Norwood Royal Cigars. That's where I go for basically all my cigars. He's got about an 1,800 square foot humidor inside his store, and I mean, my mind is blown every time I walk in that store. And especially the humidor. But this was one of my first pairing reviews. I paired it with a Baker's exclusive. It's extra aged.
Okay.
This is aged 11 years and some odd months. It's 53.5% ABV. And this is easily, when it comes to pairing a bourbon with a cigar, this is easily, and I would imagine it would pair just as well with the regular Bakers that you can find regularly on the shelves.
Having smoked it, I would agree. I'm not going to go into too much on the cigar. I will tell you this, because I know you're dying to know. I will tell you this. I absolutely enjoyed the smoke.
Excellent.
It's a good smoke. It's a good cigar. I'm not going to go into the details of how the pairing went, and I paired it with Maker's Mark Private Select.
Okay.
Because I don't want to give away, and I'm writing the article, which I'm going to publish it on Leaf and Grain Society.
Okay.
And then tag it on all of the social media.
Okay.
It's we'll probably finish the article up tomorrow. I wanted to finish it up last night, but I had a big interview. Then I met a buddy at one of the local lounges here, and I had what I asked for was a single pour of Old Forester 100, and because I know the guy, he gave me a double pour, so I ended up getting essentially three to four fingers of a pour of the Old Forester. Then went from there to a wine tasting, and had an ounce or two of like 6 different wines, and then through that realized that I'd only had a single taquito to eat all day long.
Oh, that's no bueno.
So I mean, I was good enough to drive home, but after I laid down, I don't remember much what happened after that. So
Imagine. Yeah.
So yeah. So I am drinking, and this is in honor of you.
Oh, yeah. Is that the strange collaboration?
This is the strange collaboration.
And that was probably my favorite last night.
And I picked it because the 2 cigars I have, and you hadn't jumped on when I was talking about wrappers, and so this is a Nicaraguan Habano wrapper on this one, and then I've also got the Romeo 505, which is also Nicaraguan, but this is the Criollo. And so we were talking about.
It's also Corojo wrapper, Honduras.
Yeah, that's the Honduras Corojo. But we were talking about colors of wrappers.
And I also have the Don V. It's a Corojo. It's a Corojo wrapper, all Honduras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honduran Puros, which you don't see a lot of Honduran Puros now.
Right.
All right, so you're my co-host tonight. We're not going to have any other guests on, so it's just going to be you and I. We're going to be talking. Okay. We're going to be primarily talking and going through cigar pairings, and then talking about how it is, that I wanted to, first introduce yourself to my viewers, which I don't have very many on right now, but hopefully some more will be tuning in. Talk to you.
I'm going to say, kind of a big deal. I don't know if you know that. So you should have about 1,000 viewers on right about now.
Well, see, they'll get in here. They'll get in here. they'll get in here. I mean, got one thing to say is, we don't have the ash red appeal.
Yeah, so she's on vacation.
She is. She's she's up in the Grand Tetons right now.
Okay. So she's probably not even watch.
Hey, they'll come back and watch later. Because, you are kind of a big deal. I
don't know if you and your viewers realize this, but.
Well, then I gotta ask, did you bring your viewers? Where's your viewers? Because right now I see some of mine. Where's yours?
Yeah, so mine are all VIP, so you won't see their viewership. So, there's
okay. All right. Let's see how it is.
Yeah, they're under strict surveillance, so.
They're in an incognito mode.
They're in the metal world.
That's right. So tell us who Joe is, and how you got into cigar smoking and whiskeys, and then how you got into pairings.
Okay, so I was actually a gin guy, and I drank gin probably throughout my 20s, just all day gin, just a gin and tonic, lime and lemon. It wasn't until about 30 that I met up with a buddy of mine. He decided for whatever reason that he wanted to meet up at a whiskey bar. I hadn't seen him in a while, so I agreed. I'm like, okay, let's meet up at this bar. It was called the Grafton Pub here in Chicago. I forget exactly where it's at. So I meet him up, and I'm facing a wall of all these unknown whiskey bottles. And of course, what sticks out to me, one that's very obvious, is that horse and jockey bottle that blends, of course, right?
Oh man, yeah.
Yo, bartender, give me the grenade style horse and jockey on the whiskey bar there. So I have a glass of it, and I loved it. And before I knew it, I was about 3 glasses in, and I was hooked. And so I was like, you know what? I'm 30 now. It's time to navigate. Just drinking whiskey neat. You know, like a gentleman, right? And so, not knowing any better, I go to Benny's, and I see, I'm looking for like not something very expensive, because I'm experimenting at this point. I buy Monkey Shoulder and Lafroig 10.
Oh hell.
Okay, so I rifle right through this monkey shoulder, and I'm like, yeah, let's crack open this Lafroig 10. I had no clue what Lafroig 10 was. I didn't even understand the difference between bourbon and Scotch at this point. I was like, it's whiskey. It says whiskey on the bottle. I can drink whiskey neat, right? So let's do this. I crack open that Lafroig 10. I take a whiff, and I'm like, whoa.
What the hell have I got into?
Whoa, what is this? I'm sipping on it now, and believe it or not, I loved it. It was a huge eye-opener to the world of Scotch whiskey. So I literally went from beginner whiskey drinker to top tier Scotch drinker in a week, right? I mean, that's when you're sipping on peat and enjoying peat like that, you're basically, I want to say, like top tier, like Scotch, like top level Scotch drinker as far as I'm concerned. I still have, I still enjoy the peat, but it's definitely I got to be in the mood for it more so in like the winter time, because it definitely gives you that hug, right here in the chest.
And what's funny is Lafroig itself, the peat level is very low. It's not a peaty Scotch, but it's extremely smoky Scotch, and the same with Lagavulin. There's peat in it.
Right.
And I've talked with a lot of people when I've done Scotch tastings. It's oh man, I can't do the peat. And I find that some people have a hard time with peat, some people have a hard time with smoke, but very few people have a hard time with both at the same time. So my question is how long until you tried a really peaty Scotch like a Brutal or the Ardbeg, which is or the Octomore. The Octomores are just, ooh man, some of my favorites. So
yeah,
what was your timeline getting to that, and what was your thoughts?
So it took me a while. I kind of diverted away from I started just navigating bourbon barrel influence Scotches, because as soon as I sipped into this Lafroig 10, I'm like, okay, I got to investigate a little bit what it is that I'm drinking here. And that's when I learned about peat and unpeated Scotches. So I'm like, as much as I love that, I want to navigate these unpeated Scotches. And I just absolutely fell in love with Highland region Scotches. Unpeated Scotches, mainly just bourbon barrel influenced, American oaks influenced aged Scotches. And I was hitting all the Glens, Glenmorangie, Glen Grant, what have you. And I went right to the Scotch side. I was all about Scotch. I was like Ron Burgundy on Anchorman. Scotch, Scotch, Scotch. I love Scotch. Get in my belly. I love Scotch. And I was so Scotch. I was actually, for a while there, I was anti-bourbon. You know how you can, when you're beginning, You kind of
Yeah.
pick one and you go a certain direction. And for me, it was Scotch. I'm like, I am all about Scotch. I will never be a bourbon drinker. And then my inner circle, mainly my brother-in-law, a couple other friends, they kind of started introducing me little by little to the bourbon side. And my girl and I, we took a little trip to Kentucky. I visited and toured Buffalo Trace, of course. We wanted to do something very, historically
Right.
traditional. I believe it's a historical landmark at this point in this country. And that was amazing. I mean, wherever you're walking on this campus, even outdoors, you are getting the waft of bourbon, and it just smells amazing. And then the next day we toured Old Forester.
Oh man, I love that tour.
Oh man. So we got a little bit of something new. We got a little bit of the old from Buffalo Trace. We got a little something of the new from Old Forester. Old Forester is an amazing tour. It's a brand new facility inside the original building, from what I understood, right?
Yeah.
And Old Forester was the first bottled bourbon, is what they're known for, correct? So
Right.
that was just an unbelievable tour as well, all in one building. So it was great. You got to knock everything out. They even had an on-site indoor fridge where they also not only build the barrels, but where they char the barrels. We didn't get to see the charring, but that was just an incredible tour. And they even do the labeling, bottling right there all inside one building. There's barrels of whiskey aging right there. Incredible. Between the two tours, hitting up the nearby liquor stores and the nearby bars and restaurants, I started really liking bourbon. And then comes the pandemic, and I was chasing bourbon like crazy. To the point where I have a couple unopened bottles of a couple BTACs. I've tried all the Pappies between myself and my inner circle, and just navigated all these bourbons. Just absolutely fell in love with bourbon, and the Scotch drinking just ceased. It ceased. It just boom, no more Scotch.
So you're kind of seesawing back and forth.
Right. So I'm like, man, I'm really loving bourbon. I'll never forget. I got my hands on a bottle of Blanton's Green, which is only like 80 proof or something like that. But I loved it. It's gold. I got my hands on that. I was getting my hands on some really special bottles. What I was doing is I was going to my local Binny's here, and any of these special bottles that the manager there would sell me, I would bring back like a 2-ounce or like a 4-ounce sample of it, right back to him. Even like a Pappy,
Yeah.
20 that I got, William Lou Weller. I would bring him samples because that signals to him that I'm a consumer, right? I'm enjoying the whiskey, right? I'm not a flipper, and I'm sharing the whiskey, which is probably my favorite aspect of whiskey, is sharing it, right? It's
Absolutely.
It's the people, it's the sharing of the whiskey, it's the sharing of the experience of the whiskey. Cheers. And so by doing that, anytime I walked in there, him knowing, hey, whatever I sell Joey G here, I'm probably going to get a sample of it back, and I know he's not going to be flipping it. So I'll sell that bottle to him. I even got my hands on a bottle of Old Fitz 15. Is it a King of Kentucky, right? King of Kentucky, stuff like that. He would sell me, and I would come back with samples of it, and I really built up my bourbon bar. Maybe you've seen pictures of it, but I just have an incredible bourbon collection. But for whatever reason, I decided, you know what? I know exactly what the reason was. Maybe you've experienced this. I was drinking so much bourbon, and we all know that there's about maybe like 6 flavor profiles in the bourbon, 6 typical ones. You get in like your spice, your caramel, your fruit note, your oak influence, stuff like that. I got a little bit of palate fatigue.
Okay.
My palate was just desiring something different, you know, and I knew, you know what, and this is probably as we're coming out of the pandemic at this point. I'm like, it's time for me to kind of start investigating these scotches again, and actually these world whiskeys. You know,
Right.
there's people don't realize, you know, a lot of these other countries are making whiskeys. I'm a huge fan of Starward in Australia.
Australian, I love Starward. I've done a couple of tastings with them.
Yeah, so I jumped right back into the Scotch and started investigating Irish whiskeys as well. There's a Dutch whiskey. I forgot the name. Starts with an M, I believe. Millstone. I don't know if you've ever heard of Millstone. But when I was investigating both sides of the spectrum, I had a lot to learn, of course, and I would jump on YouTube, and I started watching different YouTube reviewers. The one that I gravitated towards was Mark Hoffman of Whisky Whistle, and he's in Canada, and I want to say he's more on the Scotch side. He's Scotch focused, you know, and it was funny because I had gotten my hands on a older bottling of Glenmorangie 18, which is actually slightly peated compared to the new version, which is just fruit forward. Got my hands on it. It was actually just sitting on my father-in-law's fridge, and I'm like, "Where did you get that?" He said he helped a buddy help his parents move out of their house or something like that. It was just a bunch of booze was sitting there. He grabbed it. I mean, this is probably about a $250 bottle at this point. It maybe $300 if you order it online, if you can find it.
Yeah.
And there was probably just the heel left in it. Some of the cork had fallen down into the bottle. That's how old this bottle was.
Oh, wow.
I drank it and just I'm like, that was probably the moment that I fell in love with whiskey. And I jumped online, and this is how I found Mark. He was reviewing the Glenmorangie 18, the older bottling. It was one of his early on reviews. He was much younger at the time, and this is probably about 2015. And so I'm sipping the whiskey, along with watching his review, and I'm like, this guy is spot on. I'm just falling in love with whiskey at this point. Like this, there's so much. I mean, the knowledge that he was providing on his YouTube channel was incredible and spot on. So I just started watching his reviews and learning about Scotch whiskey, and went back to the Scotch side, you know, and started actually investigating all these world whiskeys. And so between the world whiskeys, especially Scotch, and bouncing back and forth on occasion, don't get me wrong, occasionally I still get that sweet tooth, and I come back to the bourbon, and I'm noticing it's almost in maybe other people have experienced this too. It's almost like a seasonal thing for me.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that.
For me, in the summertime, bourbon. In the wintertime, I'm all about Scotch. So I will bounce back and forth, and that's why I'll consider myself a worldly whiskey drinker.
So let's. I mean, fascinating story. And mine. I came into Scotch first, and so my very first Scotch that I had was an Oban 14, and then I moved into the Lagavulins and the Lafroigs, and then hit up the Glenlivets, the Glendronachs, the Glenmorangies, and then came into some of the blendeds, you know, like your Chivas and your Monkey Shoulder, like what you talked about. Had a Dewar's one time and never went back to it, and Famous Grouse. And then I moved over into ever into bourbon, and my very first bourbon that I ever had was a Woodford Reserve's Double Oak, and it was like, wow, this is incredible. This is so different. So I started exploring bourbons and got into ryes and got into wheateds and wheated whiskeys and such. So it's interesting, and I'll drink a whiskey. You put if it's a whiskey, I'll drink a whiskey and I'll try it. So I'm not a seasonal. It's more along the lines of what I'm going to be smoking or what I'm going to be eating, which we'll get into the pairings in a minute. I want to know about your cigar journey. Because I mean, you're very well respected in the industry, online. I mean, you're a big deal, and we hit 6, so I think maybe 2 of your people came in and said who the hell is this Greybeard guy?
We got 2, Dave. We got 2. Well, so funny story. As you're getting into all these whiskeys, and especially going into and coming out of the pandemic, we saw all these whiskey groups start to come about. And the first whiskey group that I joined, and this was probably about, I want to say 2017, 2018, was a Facebook group called Whiskey, Bourbon, and Scotch Enthusiasts. Okay, which
I know that group.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Which basically, I mean, that covers all your bases when it comes to whiskey. And so I joined that group, and it was a little, the group was at that point maybe, I don't know, maybe like 10, 20,000 people. Now it's up to like 47,000 people. It's crazy. But when I joined, it was pretty crazy. People were doing a lot of chug videos and crotch shots. And,
oh man.
And it was fun. I actually posted some funny videos. I wouldn't chug, but I did empty whiskey bottle juggling one time. I was feeling pretty good, and but you made a lot of connections in the group, and we all had the same passion for whiskey. And that's also where I learned a lot, just from my peers. And give a shout out. I'll give a shout out to Bill and Chad for starting that group. Bill Varnell, he's known as the voice of reason. I'm sure you've talked to him on the phone at least once. And then Chad, the Chad Mincadden. Cheers to those guys. I think they started the group actually meeting over beers. I mean, I think it was a beer group. There's an article a couple months back that Mark Pruitt, one of the writers for the magazine, did just on the 2 founders of WBSE, Bill and Chad. Interesting story, but I remained a member of that group since about 2018, and just got real into sampling different whiskeys, collecting different whiskeys. Continued to watch Mark, and I actually ended up sending samples to Mark and eventual bottles that we had to smuggle across the border into Canada. It worked.
Okay.
It worked a few times. And so I went live with him, and I shared all my crazy bourbons, because he doesn't really have access to that kind of stuff. And we had just become good friends over the whiskey, and we went live together. It's still on YouTube. I think it's like the mail call or something like that, with myself and Mark on his Whisky Whistle channel. And I think people kind of started taking notice to that. And then randomly about last year, around this time, I think July, August of last year, and this is well after the magazine had started. Bill and Chad started a virtual magazine,
Right.
a virtual whiskey lifestyle magazine. And immediately I subscribed, and I would read it here and there, mainly the Friday barrel reports. I would read those. Randomly, Bill posted in the group that they were looking for a cigar and whiskey pairing review writer, and this was just about the time when I was wrapping up a master's degree. So my writing skills definitely increased.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I knew how to write. And so I responded. I said, hey, I might be interested. And before I know it, I'm on the phone with Bill Varnell. And he's talking to me like I'm already in. And like, you know, they were really looking for somebody. And I think somebody else on the message board was like, yeah, Joey G is your guy. Joe Galino's your guy. You know, so I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, yeah, I can take a stab at this. Now, at this point, I knew nothing about cigars.
Okay.
I knew nothing about cigars other than I enjoyed smoking them. Okay. I probably barely even knew how to cut them properly or even light them properly. I just enjoyed, who doesn't enjoy a good smoke with their whiskey? Exactly. You know, I'm like, I know at this point, I was actually extremely knowledgeable about the whiskey. So the whiskey end of the pairing review articles, I wasn't worried about that. I'm like, I could do that all day. And so now it's time to learn about
The
cigars.
cigar.
Okay. So I revert back to YouTube and I find Brad Reith and his partner Justin JB, Know It All JB,
Yeah.
on their Zeal Cigar channel, and they're just providing all this crazy information on how to cut, light, and smoke. Right, that's their catchphrase. They're entertaining, but they provided a lot of information, and so I kind of would watch them, learn the gist of things, but then I had to follow a format, and I'm going to cheers to Camille Forte. She's the other cigar whiskey pairing reviewer in this.
Yep.
In
Read
these,
some of her stuff too.
yeah, in the Sippin' with Stogies section of the magazine. I think you're going to jump there too, correct? So I had to follow her format, and it was kind of funny because when it came to like the first, second, third portion of talking about the cigar, my first couple review articles, I was just kind of using bullet points, you know, describing the cigar. But I get a call from Bill. He's like, hey, the editors want you to have more of like a paragraph format, like you're just having a conversation
Right.
with the reader. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I think that was him telling me like your articles kind of suck.
Very, very nicely.
Oh.
Very, very nicely.
Maybe they did. They probably did. So I'm like, okay, I gotta go at this a different route here. But researching, getting my master's degree definitely helped me with being able to research things. So as I'm researching these cigars and I'm learning more about these cigars, and what really fascinates me is when I started researching these cigars is every good cigar brand, or most cigars have like a really cool backstory behind them that kind of add to the experience. And I
100%.
I started to become fascinated with these stories, and these backstories about, how the company started, or how they decided to do the blend, how they decided to name the cigar, stuff like that. Just got fascinated with it, and I became better. I became better at writing these reviews. And so again, my first review is probably about August. I didn't actually start getting good until January 1st of this year when I wrote the review, the pairing review right here.
Yeah.
Exclusive Bakers. It was a new release with a newly released Don V cigar. This was released at the end of December of 2021. But I actually met Vic, the owner of Norwood Royal Cigars, through another cigar group that I had joined because I started to get into the cigars, of course, and that's the Paisan Cigar Club. And they're actually pretty local here. The main guys for that group, they're local here in Chicago, and they would always have meetings at Norwood Royal Cigars, and that's when I went there for the first time. And I walk into the humidor. I meet Vic. I walk into the humidor, and I don't know if you remember the movie Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. It's the second one. Remember when he walks into the room and there's all the trophy animals on the wall, and he starts going crazy? I was just mind blown at the size of this humidor and the amount of cigars I was looking at. Got to know Vic. And right about that same time, he told me that this was going to be coming out, and I was like, you know what? I started writing for this virtual whiskey lifestyle magazine. How about I do an article, because I really didn't have much direction at this point, like what to pick with what, and I figured, Vic he's a bourbon guy, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to pair his bourbon or his cigar with a bourbon. In honor of him, and it just so happened that these literally came out right at the same moment, and Chad Cadden and Bill Varnell had done like a little mini review on this in a barrel report, so I was actually able to quote them in the article about it, and actually, so that was probably in my top 3 for best articles.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a solid everyday, every moment of the day type of smoke, and you can, if you're not sure what you're feeling, this is like your fallback. I know I can grab a Don V, and it'll satisfy my palate, no matter what I'm feeling or what time of day it is, whatever I ate. It's just, and it's only like $12, which is very reasonable.
That's very reasonable. And it's very reminiscent of what Oscar Valderas will do. It's very consistent all the way through the smoke, which, Oscar is known for his cigars being very consistent. In other words, for the average smoker, you're not going to pick up on a lot of strong transitions from third to third. It's very subtle, those transitions. So you have to have a really well-defined palate to be able to pick up on those. And that's why I say an average smoker. An average smoker. Every cigar is going to have some type of transition through each of the thirds on it. And I've seen a number of articles where people will say, that's bogus. There's no transitions in third to third, from the thirds. And well, in 2021 and 2020, I smoked over 1,000 cigars each year. I can tell you from 30 plus years of experience of smoking cigars, there absolutely are transitions from that. So if any of those out there that are hearing me that disagree, let's get on together and let's talk this through. But I mean, I was very pleased with the Don V. Again, I'm not going to get into the pairing on it because I don't want to give away what's going to be in my article. But it's interesting, and seeing how you write your articles and how how the other I can't remember her name, she writes her articles. It's very reminiscent of how you see a lot of cigar pairing articles being written through Cigar Snob, through Cigars and Spirits, through Cigar Aficionado. Each of the different, even in Whiskey Advocate, where you see a pairing article come up. and my style of the way that I approach it is much different. So I was kind of, as I submitted my article for last week on my pairing review, I was kind of, I didn't know how it was going to be received. And so I was very pleased with some of the feedback that I've gotten back on it so far, because that's the way that I'm going to write that way of breaking it down. And that takes us into the basics of pairing. You know, unless you really want to get into the advanced level of what we're going to talk about, the basics of pairing it's just absolutely fine. You know, is that if you find you want a cigar that's going to be able to stand up to the drink, and you want a drink that's going to be able to stand up to the cigar, to where one doesn't just overpower the other. And that's your very basic level of it. And if that's the way that you want to approach it, and you're comfortable and you're happy with that, then that's 100%. I'm not going to tell anybody that they're wrong, because they're not. And 99% of the time, when I'm just sitting out here, you know, and I've got my cigar and my coffee, or I've got my cigar and my bourbon, or my scotch, or my wine, you know, and I'm just kicking back and I'm just relaxing, that's really what I'm doing. But because I've built up this knowledge, you know, and I've built up this approach for the advanced level pairing, I can go and look at a cigar and know that's a Honduran Puro. I know that's a Criollo 98 wrapper on that. I know it's a Maduro, so I know that it's been fermented longer, so I know what type of flavors I'm going to get from it just because of the region of the seed, and so I know what I'm going to pair that with.
And so you're going to laugh at this. So, well, first of all, I am. There's nothing advanced about my level of cigar smoking and my ability to pair. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
Not an expert. I'm an enthusiast. I'm an enthusiast writer. It's about the passion. Like as you just heard, it took me a while to learn about the whiskey. It took me a while to learn about these cigars and be able to write about them properly. And and believe it or not, I've never actually read an article out of Cigar Aficionado or any of these cigar magazines. I still.
Really?
Yeah, still. You know, I'm a busy guy inside and outside the home, between my family and two jobs, you know. So, you know, I believe it or not, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't even really reading Whiskey Network magazine that regularly, mainly just the quick barrel reports that I would get in my emails on Fridays. That's about all I really had time to do, or for whiskey reading. But again, I'm an enthusiast writer, and so when I got the call from Ronnie, and you and I spoke about the October podcast. You know, when you get the call from Ronnie and he's making the suggestion, I'm like, okay, it's got to be a go. So you and I talked, and we set that up, and I'd never heard of you yet at that point. So we set the date, and I watched your podcast. You know, you and Ash read, and I was like, I'm not going to swear because it's Instagram, but I was like, holy, I'm like, this is some next level. You know, I was like, I was amazed, particularly, and this was the first podcast that I was watching. You were going grain by grain and talking about the characteristics and flavor profiles of each grain. And I was just fascinated. I was like, I'm like, okay, this podcast is next level. You know, I do the Great Lakes Smoke Show podcast, which is awesome. It's pretty humorous, you know, but it's informational at the same time.
Yeah.
But your podcast is, as far as the knowledge and I'll call it the advanced knowledge that you guys are providing on your podcast, was just next level. And I will admit, I'm crushing on red ash just a little bit. Just a little bit. Don't tell my girl.
Come on. If you're not crushing on red ash, then you know, are you a red-blooded American male? I mean, come on. She's a beautiful woman, and she's a dear friend and a sister of mine.
Yeah.
And I love her dearly. She's my baby sister.
Oh man, she is awesome. She's
and her knowledge is her knowledge is next level. I mean, she challenges. She's always talking about how I challenge her, but she challenges me.
Right.
And when she gets into her coffees and her stouts, oh Lord, I'm like, a lot of that's, you know, and I've been drinking beer since she was, you know, just coming out of grade school.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So you showed some interest in writing for Whiskey Network, and you kind of reached out to me about that, and I basically referred you to Bill, since I'm just a writer for the magazine, so I get the call from Bill, and he's asking me about you, and just, you know, just for like maybe for some credibility purposes. And I was like, Bill, I mean, this guy's next level. He would absolutely be an asset to the magazine. I've watched it at least once or twice at this point, and I'm gonna call you Gandalf the Grey of whiskey of whiskey and cigars. I mean, you're the real deal, my man. So I'm really appreciative of you having me on the podcast tonight, especially to fill in for Ash Red here.
No, I appreciate you coming on, you know, and I was looking to see who I wanted to come on, and I wanted to be able to have a conversation. And honestly, it was you when you messaged Red and I and said, you know, you use those words, the next level. And I was like, I was talking with Red, I said, that absolutely describes what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
We're trying to take the knowledge of cigars and the knowledge of each of these to the next level, to really understand of how to marry those flavors together, and for those who are interested in it. And in order to do that, this great transition into what we're talking about here, it's work. It absolutely is a lot of work, and that's why we're going to be building an education platform, a certification platform to certify the next level cigar pairing, you know, because it's not just learning about cigars, but learning about what this is in here. And this is a standard bourbon, meaning it's a ryeback bourbon. I don't know exactly what the mash bill on this is. It's 99 proof, so this isn't a high proof. The spice levels on this here, I would put this at not a high rye, so it's not going to be 36% above on it. I'm getting a little bit of spice in it. Absolutely getting the fruity notes, the black cherries that you're going to get out of a Pinot Noir. But, you know, it's learning at that level. It's really getting into, like what you talked about, of getting into the grains, getting into the mash bills, getting into the age, getting into the region of where they're distilled at. And there's a vast difference just based upon how a bourbon or an American whiskey, so we'll call it the American whiskey, so anything that fits in that America, you know, the whiskey category distilled in America, there's a vast difference in the profiles of that, just because of the environment that we have here, as you know, compared or contrasted against other regions such as Ireland, Scotland. You know, I think India would be very reminiscent of what we have. You know, so I've had some Indian whiskey, and it's very reminiscent because of the vast temperature changes.
Yes.
And then and
It's
when
fascinating.
you
Every floor in a rick house will the aging will be different from floor to floor, or at least like the bottom quarter compared to the top quarter of a rick house.
oh yeah,
You'll get different, and that's hence the you got your different color of those Blantons. Your Blanton's gold, your Blanton's black. These are different areas of the rick house. The gold, I think, is right in the center of the rick house.
the gold's in the center. The gold and straight from the barrel are going to be very similar
Yeah.
in style on it. Where the gold is cut slightly and straight from the barrel is your cast strength, and then the terminology, understanding that there's a difference between cast strength and there's a difference between barrel proof. And so barrel proof generally, and there's no legal classification of either,
Okay.
but generally barrel proof is going to be the proof that it goes into the barrel. And as the more angels share, so the more of the water evaporates, it actually increases the proof of it. What they'll do in a barrel proof is that they're bottling it, they'll cut it back to barrel proof, where cast strength is what you get straight out of the cask on it. And so while it can't go into the barrel higher than 125 proof, it can actually come out of the barrel higher than that because of the evaporation levels. And all that's going to depend upon how long it's been aged. All of that comes into play on the flavor profiles when you're going to pair a cigar, when you're taking it to that next level of it. And you're thinking about all of that. And then knowing your grain, knowing what type of flavor profiles you get out of the grain. Because you're absolutely right. You're going to get caramel out of it. You're going to get sweet. The sweet's going to come from the corn. You're going to get caramel. That's going to come from the charring. You're going to get maybe toasted marshmallow or toasted oak, toasted vanilla, because the vanilla comes from the oak, and the toasting if it's a toasted barrel. And knowing what the difference is between a char and a toast and the different levels of the char, you're going to get chocolate notes. The chocolate notes come from the barley of that. That's why we can try a single malt coming out of Highlands or coming out of Speyside, or even coming out of Lowlands, and we're going to pick up chocolatey notes. But your palate has got to be trained to be able to recognize that, because those are the subtle notes that you get. Generally, we'll get those on the retro. And so what we're doing is, in taking it to that next level, is bringing that awareness and then training people of how to be able to come in and recognize that. And when you can do that, now I can pick up, so I'm smoking a Habano. Habano is very similar to the Criollo. You're smoking a Criollo. Yours is coming from Honduras. Mine's coming from Nicaragua. This one here is actually from Esteli and not from Jalapa. But these wrappers going from Honduras to Dominican to Esteli or Condego or Ometepe or Jalapa in Nicaragua, going down to Brazil, going to Ecuador, the same seed is going to give you different notes in each region.
What are you doing writing for a magazine? You should be writing an encyclopedia on whiskey and cigars. See, this is what I'm talking about. The level that you guys are at is just incredible. And again, I would watch all these different whiskey reviewers, whether it was Mark at Whisky Whistle, the two guys in Texas at the Whiskey Vault.
Whiskey Vault, yeah,
right
down in Austin.
Ralphie.
Mm-hmm.
Ralphie. I would watch Ralphie a lot. And who's the guy? He always does the recycle videos where he's got the empty bottles. He talks about each bottle briefly, and then he tosses it in the recycle bin.
I don't know. I don't think I've seen him.
I forgot. I should know his name, but I would watch him, because you'd learn about like 20 different bottles of whiskey in like 10 minutes, whether it was worth buying and stuff like that. And that was one of the main reasons why I started watching those reviews. I wanted to know what was worth buying. You know, because after you start with those entry level whiskeys, you start to crave, you know, better whiskeys, and unfortunately your palate starts to crave those more aged and expensive
And,
whiskeys.
yeah, and I mean,
You know,
you're going to go drop a, 120, 150, 200, 250, 300 on a bottle. You want to know, is that bottle going to be worth your investment? And that's where a lot of it comes down to, just like, okay, you telling me that Oscar Valderas, when I did my research on that scene, that Oscar Valderas did that, I know his style. I know what his profiles as a blender. I know his history, where he came from on this, and knowing who Carlito Fuente is, 262 Gabe, Gabe Seaman here. He's the one of the master blenders for 262 cigars, and knowing what his what his style is, what he does when he's putting together the cigars, getting into that and knowing it at those levels is where it really helps you understand what the profiles are, and then that gives you the ability to be able to walk into any humidor and go, okay, hey, I'm looking for something that's going to give me a very similar type of profile or very similar type of blend as that of the Hemingway short story, but I'm not wanting something from Dominican Republic. What do you have that's from Nicaragua? And then somebody being able to, or you just knowing, because you know what those are, being able to come in and go, okay, I know that the Hemingway is a Cameroon wrapper, and I know that AJ Fernandez is a phenomenal blender. He has a lot of his own great takes on the Cameroon, and so I'm gonna pick up the New World Cameroon, and I think that's going to give me a similar profile to it, and being able to understand those nuances of it.
so when you smoked your first Don V, was it what you expected from Oscar?
It was very reminiscent of Oscar. It's what I would expect from him on it. Like I said, I really enjoyed the consistency with it. I enjoyed the subtle nuances of the transitions on it, especially in the retrohale. It's a very nice. It's like you said. It's a great go-to. It's a medium bodied, what I would call a medium bold cigar. It's not going to be an overpowering. It's something that I could pair very easily with a number of different bourbons.
Yes.
It is bold enough that if you have a very distinctive drink, that it can overpower the drink.
Okay.
It can overpower the drink. So if you have a very distinctive drink, and I'm trying to be very careful to tiptoe around what I'm saying here, it can overpower the drink, not in a way to where it makes the drink not enjoyable, but enough to where when you're taking your pairings to that next level, as what we're talking about, you want to see to where one will complement the other and bring out some notes, or one will contrast the other where it'll balance out and allow other subtle notes come forward, or just be an even balance pairing across where one's not impacting and the other's either, but they're very balanced on it. I really prefer, either a complementary or contrast type pairing. A balanced pairing is very nice. When you have a cigar that overpowers that to where it's making the drink, and this wasn't that case, to where it's making the drink that is not enjoyable, then you don't pick up on any of those notes. Okay.
Now, when you say distinctive drink, can you elaborate on that a little bit? When you
something that may be like a stay finished, a finished type, say I would not pair that cigar with Angel's Envy bourbon with its port cast finished, or with the Angel's Envy rye.
I can see that, yeah. Or
Yeah,
that three-chord bourbon that you have there, that's finished in, it's like a Pinot Noir cask.
yeah. It's well the cigar would overpower the Pinot Noir. So those black cherry notes
Okay.
that you would get, that the notes that you would get from the Pinot Noir, I wouldn't be able to pick that up with that cigar on that. And so with this one here, this pairing is actually coming out really nice. Now, I haven't been paying attention to the notes, because when you're doing this, I mean, as you know, you've got to focus in to pay attention, no distractions, but it's enjoyable, and I do know that as I'm taking a draw off the cigar and going to the bourbon, I'm able to pick up those subtlety notes on it. If I was really focusing in on this, then I would be shutting up and I would be quieting, and you would be seeing me, and I would be really trying to pay attention to how one is impacting the other. And the bourbon to the cigar is still very nice. But I knew that was going to be that way when I picked out the pairing. And that's what through the writing, through the education, through the podcast, through the discussions, we want, those who want to take it to the next level, is to be able to sit down and go, yes, I know that. Because what you don't want, and this is what we talked a lot about, is you don't want to go to Cigar International, and you go in and you pick up a cigar and you order a drink, and that drink is overpowering the cigar so much that the cigar's not enjoyable, and you're blaming the cigar. Right. Or vice versa.
And that is how, and I recently learned this. Richard Patterson from Dalmore, Richard the Nose, hello, how are you? That guy, very eccentric on his way of enjoying whiskey. That's how he came up with the Dalmore cigar malt, because when he was doing all these presentations in the 80s, afterwards he would take his little break by the bar and have a cigar, and people were sliding down like the peatiest, smokiest scotch that was at the bar down to him to enjoy with his cigar, and of course he's realizing, like, this is just smoke on top of smoke on top of smoke, and it's not enjoyable. So he came up with that cigar malt, which is like for me a unicorn whiskey and cigar pairing whiskey.
Oh yeah. I've paired a number of different cigars for people with the cigar malt. And then, like you said, you're a big fan of the Lefroy 10, which is, a very smoky, or say the Ardbeg Ugadale or the Corrievecon, which is both a very.
And you had asked me earlier, eventually did I come back to the smoky ones, and eventually I joined the Winnipeg Whiskey Club, and that's Mark's club up in Canada, and we would do a lot of virtual tastings towards the tail end of the pandemic, and they would always have at least one or two like peated or smoky scotches at the tail end of each tasting, and that would always bring me back to the enjoyment of peaty scotches, and those were mainly in the winter time as well. I'll come back to them on occasion. It's very rare, because it gives you that nice intense hug right here, and that's not always what you want to, go to bed with, something like, it's just kind of too much. But and back to what you're saying about not being distracted.
Yeah.
When you're doing these pairings, and this is going to be I'm not at your level as far as knowledge, okay? I'm going to admit that. No problem, okay? Kudos to you. And maybe eventually I'll get there. We'll hope, we can only hope. But what I do, I'll pick an afternoon when I know nobody's going to be here at the house. I got some free time to myself, at least a good 2 hours to dedicate to this whiskey writing. You know, doing the pairing review. You know, I'll type away on. I have my little format already. You know, set, ready to go. Just copy and paste with a fresh one, and I'll type in notes on each third of the cigar. But what I do, even on top of, you know, having that 2 hours of no distraction here on my back deck, which is where I'm at now. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot of pictures of with me and my cigar and this flag right here.
I'm loving it. I'm loving the Whiskey Network sign that you got back there too.
My girl actually got that for me as a gift.
Awesome, that's cool.
That was in February, but I'll throw a pair of headphones on. Throw a pair of headphones on, and I will listen to relaxing music, mainly instrumentals like Tycho or Mellerman, or I think it's like Birds of Canada, stuff like that. You know, just to really get my mindset and my mojo focused on the cigar. I'll typically go through the first third without sipping the whiskey, and then about maybe going a little bit into the second third, then I'll start introducing the whiskey to the cigar. But that helps me keep my focus. You know, there's nothing at home that's going to interrupt. I'm distracted from anything going on, whether it's, you know, here in Chicago, police sirens, gunshots, what have you, you know. But I'm actually right by a fire department, so you'll hear sirens on occasion. You might have already heard them, I'm not sure. But I'll listen to the music, and that kind of takes my pairings to the next level to help maintain my focus. And my last article was the first article, that the Magic Cask with the Art of Magic from
Yes.
Rockefeller Cigars. I introduced music to my article, and you know, and I mentioned that also pairing well with the cigar and the whiskey is this song. You know, on my playlist on Spotify that I created, all of a sudden a song came up, and I would as soon as it ended, I would play it over again and play it over again as I was smoking this pairing. I just realized, man, this is just spot on. This jam is spot on with what I'm smoking and drinking at the moment.
Oh yeah, we've talked about. I was on the Texas Cigar Roadshow, and I've been on there a number of times. And they're on YouTube, more on Rumble now, just because of all the bullshit that YouTube is doing. Mm-hmm. But we did an episode to where we were pairing cigars to an event. So it's like, you know, an activity. What kind of cigar do you smoke when you're out golfing? What kind of cigar do I smoke when I'm doing my woodworking? What kind of cigars do I smoke when I'm doing something? And a lot of that comes into the mood-based type thing. You know, so as your cigar, you know, and the same thing with our whiskeys or our wines. You know, what kind of mood I'm in is going to really have an influence on what it is that I'm going to drink or smoke as well. So absolutely on it. And I'm not biased in this, but I use my pairing journal that I created. I designed a pairing journal, and so I go through it. So I go through the cigar, through the thirds, and through the drink, and notes about it, and then cigar to the drink, and drink to the cigar through every single third, and just take notes on that. And then I don't look at it. I don't write the article immediately. I don't look at it for a day or so, and then come back and bring that whole experience back to memory of what I was experiencing, and you know, and how I felt. And that way, I come in through writing the article on it. But you know, being single, it's a little bit easier for me to get rid of the distractions for a couple of hours. Not that that's always a good thing, but hey, you know, there's you find the advantages in the different aspects of it.
No, absolutely. And you know, between the cigar and the whiskey, and then, you know, listening to the, you know, the relaxing instrumentals on the music, the particular music that I listen to while doing these pairings, they definitely bring about emotions. They bring about memories.
Hmm.
You know, uh, I recently did a Christoph 685
Oh, nice.
and um, Glenn Case, the owner of Christoph Cigars, his, and if you research it, his goal with that cigar was to bring you back some kind of childhood memory from your childhood home, you know, and um, it did exactly that for me. It brought me back to my like my the dinner table at my parents' home, you know,
Hmm.
for dessert, you know, over a special cannoli cake that we would get from a bakery that doesn't even exist here in Chicago. You know, it was amazing how it brought about that nostalgic memory of something
Right.
so specific, and not just bringing me back to the table, but bringing me back to the table on a summer evening with the windows open, surrounded by family.
Oh, there you go.
You know,
Oh,
you know, I was just, this is incredible, and he nailed it with that cigar. And
I love Christoph cigars. Now I'm a big fan of the pissed off Christoph. You know, it's uh it's a good, very bold cigar,
mm,
and that's one that I would absolutely pair with a Lafroig or Lagavulin or a Octomore. You know, very peaty, very smoky, because it can stand up to it.
okay, yeah,
It can stand up to the drink, and the drink's not going to overpower it, and the cigar is not going to overpower the drink. And so with that, because of that smokiness, you're going to see those pepper notes really come forward in in that cigar. You know, where typically, because you know that cigar is a double ajero, it's all Nicaraguan, it's a lot of Ometempe and Esteli sitting in there. So and Ometepe is a very volcanic region. Esteli is, it's got the outskirts of the volcanic region in there, plus also some very fertile soil. So you're going to get, nice balanced notes in it. But you're going to see where that peat, that peat in those is going to be subtle, unless you're going with a very peaty Scotch. Then you'll see those fruity notes in the cigar because of the Esteli region come forward. But if it's a really smoky, you're going to see those pepper notes come to the front of that in the retro and come into the front of it as it's hitting your palate, rather than being just on the very back end and in the final third, which you see in a lot of your very strong peppery cigars.
and speaking of peppery, when it comes to peppery and peat, probably one of my favorite peated scotches is going to be Ardbeg Corey Vrecken.
Oh yeah, the Corey Brecken. I killed my bottle of it a couple of weeks ago at a bottle night.
Very
Um,
pepper forward
yes.
for me.
Well, and the Wee Beastie, and talking to Ardbeg on it, and their whole idea of doing the Wee Beastie, which you never see a 5-year-old Scotch. I mean, you really don't. 5-year-old. I mean, a 10-year-old, 12-year-old Scotch is very young. Again, back to what we were talking about, because of the environment there, it takes longer for it to be able to uh, pull the notes and the flavors out of the barrels on that. But that Wee Beastie is a very peppery, and they came up with that distillation process with it because they wanted to be able to compete with rye.
Okay.
And it comes out at 5-year-old, and it's beautiful. I love it.
And as we're talking about the distillation process, I'm thinking about this this Australian whiskey that I tried in the Winnipeg Whiskey Club. It was actually their whiskey of the year, and it was a Rockfort expression. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rockfort Distillery in Australia.
No, I haven't. I've only heard of. I only know of Starward. Now,
Yeah.
well, I take that. I've only tried Starward. I've heard of Rockford, just from watching the Instagram channels, and getting on lives with some of the mostly the ladies that are from Australia that are really promoting it and pushing it. But I've only tried Starward.
Yeah, so we had Mr. Rockfort on the Zoom with us, and we're sampling this Rockfort expression. I forget exactly what it was called. He had us all guess the age on the whiskey, and everybody, I mean, these are all experienced malt whiskey drinkers. Everybody was guessing 20 plus years. And then he reveals to us that it's aged exactly 2 years. The complexity in this whiskey was just insane. And he was explaining how it's all in the distillation process. The exposure to the distillate, to the copper, the amount of time that it's exposed, stuff like that. Real intricate details about his distillation process. And I was just extremely fascinated by that, and just how he could create a whiskey that tasted something that was comparatively 20 years or older, and it's only been aged 2 years.
Well, and a lot of that's also going to be in the aging process, because if you think about Australia's climate, Australia goes through extreme heats and extreme colds, just like what we do here.
Right.
And they're, and that's why Australia has some absolutely beautiful wines. I mean, the Australian Shiraz is one of the best Shiraz out there that can compete with Rhone Valley Shiraz all day long. But they go through extreme temperatures. And so as you think about that, when that liquid, it heats up, it's going to expand and it's going to go into the wood. And then as it cools down, it's going to contract. And so as it's contracting, it's pulling those flavors out of the wood on it. Whereas Scotland and Ireland, they don't have the extreme. They don't go into the 90s, the hundreds, and down, and it gets cold, but it doesn't, so you don't have as much expansion of it. And so it takes longer for it to come in, to be able to draw those flavors out of the woods on it. And so when we're talking about our American whiskeys, back to American whiskeys, which most American whiskeys is going to be in a new charred oak barrel. You'll have some single malts that won't be, that's going to follow more of the traditional single malt process, to where it's in a single pour barrel. So, that, in other words, that barrel's had something in it before. But that's why, when we see a 3-year-old bourbon, and we consider that a young bourbon, but yet its color is going to be a nice, a little bit lighter amber than this one. I would put this one probably at maybe a 5-year or 6-year-old. But you're going to see some nice golden colors on it. And that's the caramel that it's pulling out. That's because of that process of it. And whereas if you take a Scotch that is aged, as you were talking about, aged in a first pour bourbon barrel, so it's got the char on it, it's going to have to be aged in that barrel for many, many, many years in order for it to start getting that colorization of it, because it's not going to expand into the wood as much as it would here in a more drastic temperature change environment, is what we have here, especially here in Texas. But, even across the different regions here, down here in Texas, we can have a 2-year-old bourbon that looks like, that a 2 or 3-year-old bourbon that looks like a 5 or 6-year-old bourbon that was aged in barrels up in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, you know, up in the far north where you don't have that 100-degree temperature change. And all of that comes into play on that. And that's where it really helps to know what your environment is like and where it's being aged at. And Australia gives you that too.
Yeah.
India gives you that. Italy gives you some of that. Some of the regions in Scotland and Ireland, because it's much further north than what we are, even here in the United States, you're not going to get as much of that. Further away from the equator.
And here I sit, mind blown. I could probably ask you about 30 different questions in 30 different directions based on what you just said. But I heard the word process, and you know, the wood expanding and extracting extracting its flavors into the whiskey, and then you add in the cigar to the whiskey, and now we're extracting even more flavor.
Yep. Absolutely.
On both sides of the aisle. And that's where I just become so intrigued at what happens when you pair a cigar with a whiskey. And I called it an unusual awesomeness. And Frank from the Great Lakes Smoke Show, he loved that. He's like, you got to put that in an article. So I did. But that is, you know, if I was going to pick two words to describe a whiskey and cigar pairing, it's unusual awesomeness.
It's I'm going to quote you that we've been quoting all night long so far. It's taking it to the next level.
Yes.
You know, it's just like, are you a wine drinker?
Not so much, just because I'm on my whiskey kick for the past 7-8 years now.
But we all know about wine pairings. I mean, because you go to a fancy restaurant and a sommelier comes out there, and you know that sommelier, he or she is talking about the particular vintage of grapes and coming in from this region, you know, and it's a 2012 or 2016, which by the way are two fantastic vintages of wines across the globe. And how this is going to pair so well with this type of food because you're going to see these types of notes come out and they're really going to complement each other, and it's going to really enhance that experience for you. Yes, Gabe, whiskey is cheaper, you know, for your good stuff. It's the same thing. Right. It's the exact same thing with cigars, and pairing that cigar with a whiskey, or pairing that cigar with a wine, or pairing that cigar with a coffee, and even pairing that cigar with food. It's the exact same thing, and it's finding that marriage.
Yes.
Of those flavors. Yeah. To where, you know, I mean, you've got your girlfriend, or you've been married, you know, and every person, you know, that is or has a good marriage or a good relationship, you know, that you guys are going to complement each other, and you're going to have contrast with each other, to where I'm stronger in one area and she's weaker in that area, but she's stronger in an area that I'm weaker in, and that contrast of those, that marriage of those, and being able to work those together really makes that relationship strong, right?
Yeah.
Take that same approach with your pairings. The same approach where you want those marriage of those flavors, contrast, complementary, both of them together, and you have that unusual awesomeness. I like that.
That's why you stay single, isn't it? Because you already have that unusual awesomeness going on right there in that chair.
I'm staying single because I'll be damned if I can't find a woman that likes, you know, that likes cigars, that likes cigars, likes whiskey, and my number one, and I always bring out my faith on just about every show just because it happens to, you know, is a strong Christian woman and has a heart for God. So those are my three qualifications that I'm looking for.
Excellent. How did you and Ash Red hook up?
Ash Red and I, you know, being just friends, we met at Underground Cigar Shop, our local cigar shop.
Yes.
And we just got to, you know, be friends and knowing each other and talking with each other. And I saw her getting into cigar pairings. And then when I decided to start Leaf and Grain, and it's something that I really wanted to do, and I tried it back in, I want to say 2017 and 2018. And I started a group called Crafted Cravings. And that really took a turn. I intended it to be this, but not knowing how to get it to this or what this was. And that group turned around to be a Facebook group that's self-sustaining for different artists to come together and just share what we're doing and how we do, you know, what we're doing about our craft, and, you know, and our love for the craft. So whether it's writers, woodworkers, blacksmiths, illustrators, painters, what have you, just a number of them that are there. And we'll just periodically, someone will come in and say, hey, this is a new project that I'm working on, or post some of their work, and we'll do thumbs up, hey, good job, you know. And it's not a lot of activity, but it works.
Right. Just so, amazing the connections that you make just walking into a cigar lounge or a cigar shop, you know, because most people I've met that enjoy cigars are whiskey drinkers as well.
And the cigar, I call the cigar the great equalizer, because, you know, no matter your background, religion, sexual preference, political stance, what have you, we can always talk about something with cigars.
Right, and I'll quote Jera, who's on your podcast a couple weeks ago. That was the night I met Greg Glass, the #2 guy from Dalmore Distillery, to do the Dalmore 14 tasting. But I'll quote her, and this was on, I think, the first time she jumped on with the Great Lakes Smoke Show crew at like a Blanco cigar event in, I believe it was Florida, probably. But she said we could probably solve all the world problems over a cigar.
She said that on our podcast as well, and 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
So Leaf and Grain, we're at 1 year now.
Okay.
July 20th will be 1 year. You know, that week of the 1 year from our first show. And back in June, I got the idea of, you know, I've been part of the Bourbon Thieves group, and I got the idea of going live and talking about cigars and doing a review. And so I did a review, went live, a couple of people came on, and I reached out to Red and I said, do you want to do a show? Let's do an Instagram show. And I explained to her what it was and talked with her about what my idea was with Leaf and Grain Society, and asked her if she wanted to be a partner in this, and then asked Spice Man Matt Harris, who's a chef, if he wanted to be a part of it. And it's just grown from that. You know, and it's been a good friendship from that, and it's, you know, and it's turning into be a good partnership from that as well. Red has the love of her life, and he's into cigars, and, you know, if God wants me to not be single anymore, then he'll introduce me to the love of my life, who will be into cigars.
There you go. And you mentioned earlier, you said a key word that really hits home for me, and that's process.
Yeah.
And, you know, getting into the cigars and investigating these cigars, I realize just on the process alone, and there's many other aspects where cigars and whiskey, there's all these parallels between the two products, and back to the process you're talking about, from grain, you know, to the distillation process, to the aging process, to the bottle, to your glass, to your hand.
Yep.
Just an incredible process. And then, from my understanding on these cigars, there could be up to 200 plus hands that touch your cigar before it reaches your mouth, which is kind of weird, but kind of true.
Well, and the time that it takes to go from seed to the priming of it, and so it's the priming of it is when they're pulling the leaves off, and so they'll stop with the bottom primes, the bottom leaves, which is going to be your velados and your secos, and then go up to your visos and then your ligeros. And if they haven't cut the flower part off the top, which they often do, is that's the media tempos on that. And so some cigars, very rare cigars, will have the media tempos in there on that.
Yeah, most of those terms you just said, I have no idea. And believe it or not, I'm still to this day, I'm literally like a one cigar a day kind of guy. For me, it's just about finding that right moment in the day when I catch that nice break where I don't really have, you know, much to do for a little bit, and I'll light up a cigar. It's not every day. It's not even every day. Usually it's a special occasion or something like that where I'll do two or more, you know.
Well, as you notice, I'm on number 2 just while we're on the show.
Yeah.
And so this is number 4 today.
Yeah.
This is number 4. But yeah, back to the process. I mean, there is a full process. You know, once they've primed all the leaves, then they go into the curing barn. You know, and that's where you've seen the videos of them stringing them together and then hanging them on these sticks and then hanging them up on different racks in the barn.
Yes.
And so a lot of that comes into play. It's just the same as a rickhouse.
Right.
Is to where those leaves are curing, they're drying out. And then the fermentation process starts, and they get put into these piles, these like bale piles, which are called pilons, and that's where the fermentation process starts of that. And how long they're in the fermentation is going to determine the color of the wrapper, where they are in the pile, what the temperature of that pile is, which they typically want it to become anywhere between 123 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. On it can go up to 129, sometimes 130 of it, but then you're taking the chance of mold and rot coming in when you get higher on that. Then where, you know, by this time you've already had a number of hands coming in, and then it goes into the separation. The separation process is to where they're separating the leaves out by the type of leaf it is and by the color of that leaf. And if you ever get a chance to watch a video and a good documentary to watch on this, and you can buy it for like $4.99 on Amazon Prime. It's called Hand Rolled. And you'll see that the women, you know, they'll get a pile of leaves where you and I are looking at that and go, okay, I see a little bit of color variations. And they're just taking it and just separating these all out. And these are the fillers, the binders, and the wrappers. And they're just separating these all out on this. And then from there, then they'll start going to the rollers. And all through this time, the blenders, the master blender and the blenders are picking out. Now the blenders are coming out and picking out, okay, I want this one here. They're coming in and they're taking the fillers and they're bunching them up and lighting the fillers up. and then lighting them up and smoking that. It's like, okay, no, let's add this in here. Yep, all right, no, let's add this in here. Okay, yes, that's what I want. Now let's do this with this type of binder and this type of wrapper, and that goes out to, and that's the blend for that particular cigar that they're making. And you guys be reading what Gabe is talking about as well, because he's
point with the sea salt. You got that Jefferson's Ocean, with that sea, influence on those barrels, which from what I understand, was discovered by accident.
and the sea salt. So one thing is, Jefferson's Ocean, they describe them all by voyages. After voyage 12 or 13 or so, they no longer kept the barrels out exposed to the sea salt. They started putting them in containers. And Ryan can confirm with me on this one. Ryan, I believe Jefferson's Ocean is around voyage 12 or 13 that they moved away from the barrels being exposed, so able to get that sea salt into containers. So really those barrels are no longer getting the sea salt on it. But what you do get is, because of the rockiness of it out in the ocean, it's causing the bourbon, the whiskey, to expand and contract and expand and contract. So soaking up those flavors on that. But yeah, I mean, Gabe is right. On Dominican Republic, and Cuba, you have a lot more sea salt that's coming in, and that's going to impact the flavors. You've got cross-pollination from different areas to where, depending upon what other type of vegetation that is around, and as the bees are pollinating, the flowers of the tobacco plant, and coming from, say, banana plantation here, that's going to impact the flavors as well. And what a lot of people don't realize on your whiskeys, where the cooperage gets their wood from, where the cooperage gets that oak, whether it's American oak or French oak, and the terroir, where it's getting it from, and what other types of trees and other types of vegetations is going to impact the flavors that you're getting from that oak as well.
And what was aged in that barrel?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're coming into another aged barrel, so that's going to impact the flavors as well. But say you're getting the cooperage got their white oak from the Pacific Northwest. Well, we know that there's a lot of pine trees. There's a lot of evergreens that's up in the Pacific Northwest, as down in the Atlantic Southeast. You're coming down into the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida regions. Not as many pine trees, and there's other more tropical type trees that are there. You're going to get a different type of notes from the oak in those two different regions. So a lot of that comes down to where the cooperage that's making these barrels are getting the wood.
And you have those scotches, like your Old Pulteney, your Oban. They're getting that seaside influence too, right there in the aging process. Creates some awesome characteristics on those whiskeys.
Whether or not it's brand new French oak barrels, or their sherry casks, or their bourbon casks that they got from here, their port casks, their other type of Burgundy wine, Bordeaux wine casks that they're getting from France. All of that comes into play of it. But for the longest time, all Scotch were aged in sherry casks. And it wasn't until in the 1800s when we saw the bourbon rage, really come up, and the market pull that Scotland had on whiskey started coming down. And that's where we saw the change in the types of Scotch came. So it used to be that predominantly not all, but the majority of Scotch was all going to be your peated smoked Scotch. But they were seeing that they were losing their market, their hold on the market, you know, and so it's coming down, and because they're losing sales because bourbon is sweeter.
Right.
And so
you look at these Don V's, you can nub them. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, I nub mine.
Yeah.
And I nub my I nub the one that I was smoking. Now I've got to relight this one. But yeah, I mean, all of that comes into play. Of all of those different variables come into play when you're wanting to take your advanced, your pairings, or your understandings of cigars, or your understandings of whiskeys, or your understanding of wines. You know, we haven't even got into coffees and beers, you know, to that next level, to the true understanding of what it is that you're drinking. And all of this comes down to really of the maturing your palate, growing your palate so that you're able to pick up. Because you're absolutely right. You mentioned earlier that, you know, just about every whiskey, you're going to get a stable set of notes out of this. You know, if it's a bourbon, you pretty much guarantee that you're going to pick up some caramel. You're going to pick up some vanilla. You're going to pick up some type of spice. That's not the proof, and there's a difference between the spice and the proof. You're going to pick up some type of sweetness, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's when that you're able to start distinguishing those subtle notes that you're not able to normally pick up, such as your stone fruit, such as your tropical fruits, such as the distinguishing between your white pepper and your black pepper and your peppercorn, your cooking spices, being able to distinguish between turmeric, cumin, and cinnamon. Yeah. And you can pick up every single one of those types of notes in your whiskey, and you can pick up all those notes in your cigars, but your palate has got to be able to pick up those nuances because those are the subtle notes that are in there.
And it takes a while for you to develop your palate. You know, and
it does.
You mentioned earlier it is work, because you not only do you have to sip these whiskeys, but you have to understand, you know, the process. You have to understand what type of whiskey that you're sipping on, and that helps you pick out those little nuanced flavors in these whiskeys. And for me, there's a lot more flavor profiles in these scotches, in these malted whiskeys compared to the bourbons. They're both kick ass, but like I said, I got that palate fatigue just sipping on bourbon all year long throughout the pandemic, and all of a sudden I realize my palate is just desiring more flavor.
Have you gotten much into ryes or wheated bourbons?
A little bit. I really the best rye that I've had was a really unique rye by the Barrel. They did their it was like a brandy or some kind of Martinesque cask influence rye or something like that. Very, very fruity and tropical rye. Is seagrass.
Seagrass, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would challenge you to venture into some ryes that are not in finished ryes. You know, so it's not going to be in a finished barrel. You know, something like that. So true pure ryes, and get into some of your good ryes that we would consider the barely legal ryes. And so barely legal ryes where it's going to be 51% rye. You know, then you're going to see, a 51% rye, you know, and then probably a 30-40% corn, like
Phil.
Yeah. Look at Sagamore. Sagamore's got some beautiful ryes. Castle and Keys Restoration Rye is an amazing rye. Then you can, maybe go up a little bit. Blue Run Rye, Whistle Pig Rye, like what Gabe is saying. All of these are really good higher ryes, and you're gonna see, yes, it has the spice, it has the pepper on it, but you're also gonna see a lot of really fruity notes come out of it, because ryes are not just known for the spice, but ryes are also known for the fruity flavor. So that's where you're going to get your black fruits, like your blackberries, your raspberries, your black cherries, your dark cherries. You're going to get your stone fruits, such as your peaches and apricots and such.
Last night we had Amplify Rye by 3 Chord Bourbon, and it was huge black cherry flavor in there, big time, especially with a little water added to it. Definitely.
Yeah, that water is real. Just a drop or two of room temperature water really is going to open up that body to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I got to recommend you try that Amplify Rye.
I'm going to have to try it. I'm really enjoying this this 3 Chord here, and I've had it before. You know, like I said, I brought it out. It's like Joe G is going to be on, and I know he just did a show with 3 Chord, so I gotta pay my respect and pull my 3 Chord out.
We had a lot of fun with Neil Gilardo and David Miller. David Miller is he's a guitarist and singer for Miller and the Other Sinners. It's like a Southern soul type of rockin' type band, like a jam band almost.
Yeah.
A lot of influence from ZZ Top. They got a nice saxophone in there.
I think they're on Spotify, aren't they?
They are. I recommend people check them out because very, very good, like very full on instrumentals in his music. But I'm glad you grabbed that 3 Chord. That's the Pinot Noir. That's a very special bourbon. And Neil was explaining it was made in collaboration with a winery. This Strange is their last name. They have a winery, I forget where, but it's in honor of a daredevil guy that was dating his daughter, and he had an accident. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but he passed from the accident. It's very tragic.
Oh man!
They made this strange collaboration between his family's winery and Neil's 3 Chord Bourbon. And that's what you're sipping on there.
Yeah, so it's strange. According to the back label, a strange family that's in Santa Rita Hills, California.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I recommend it.
Very balanced.
Very balanced, great flavors to it. You can the flavor, the notes from the wine is very subtle in it, but it's really nice and balanced. It's even pairing nicely with the Romeo and Julieta, the 505 on this one. This is a Nicaraguan Puro on it. Yes, Gabe, Redwood Empire has some good ryes as well. And then also Rare Perfection out of Canada has got some good ones as well. Well, brother, we're coming up on 2 hours. I can stay on if you want to continue talking. I want to be respectful to your time.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot.
I'm still sitting here. It's probably going to take me a day or two to process everything that we talked about tonight. So thank you. The knowledge that you bring forth to the whiskey and cigar community is incredible. And I'm really looking forward to reading about more articles from you in the Whiskey Network magazine.
I'm looking forward to it too. I'm hoping that that one day that Bill will feel confident enough in my articles to publish them in not just the newsletter, but let's take them over into the magazine. That way, I'm finding that I have a harder time staying to the 500 word count. My latest one that I just submitted, that I just sent on in to Brian was just over 600.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I try to be as quick and snappy with my articles as possible, even on the regular publication of the magazine. I mean, let's face it. I mean, even for those interested or passionate about it, they don't want to read too much of a lengthy of an article.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
It's and like we were talking in chat the other day, making that transition. I have to put myself back into the mindset of when I was writing white papers. So, being in the tech industry for as long as I have been, I've written a number of white papers. So, this isn't my first venture into writing. This is my first venture into writing that's not technical based papers.
Okay.
And so I've written a number of white papers, so I have to put myself back into that transition of it to where this is less than 1,000 words. You get your point out, you get it across, but still provide enough filler in there so that it's easy reading, and it's not like what you mentioned earlier, bullet points.
Exactly. I try to find the right words that encapsulates, an entire feeling, emotion, and experience. Bring the reader right to that moment that I'm experiencing in the first third, final third, the pairing, even in the introduction of the cigar. But like I said, I've gotten better, and I look forward to reading your articles. I'm pretty sure reading your articles is gonna make everyone better in the magazine. And a quick shout out to everybody that contributes to the Whiskey Network magazine. You have a lot of people that write for that magazine.
Oh yeah, I was really impressed in reading through all of the articles, both in the newsletter and the magazine itself. From Brian's article on Milam and Green. I thought he did Milam and Green a great deal of justice. The two pairing articles that you and the other gal did, the women in whiskey, and she did who she was featuring, a lot of justice on this. There's some quality writing in there.
Absolutely, and there's no magazine out there like it. I mean, it's all virtual. It's never printed. I think Whiskey Advocate, are they like quarterly? I don't know. Maybe they do.
Whiskey Advocate's quarterly. Cigar Aficionado, I believe, is monthly. Wine Spectator is, I believe it's monthly as well. Yeah, wine, and I get all of those. And Cigar and Spirits is quarterly.
Okay, and you'll see as you get deeper into the writing and get publicized a little more often. It opens some incredible doors. And again, I'm just an enthusiast writer. I'm Joe Blow from Chicago. Just passionate about this stuff. And through the whiskey writing, now I'm meeting the number 2 guy for Dalmore Distillery and sipping whiskey and talking with him, Greg Glass.
Oh yeah. I'm
going live with a rock and roll Hall of Famer, Neil Gallardo. Talking whiskey with him. So you'll see it's going to open up some doors for you, and I'm excited for you. And like I said, I look forward to reading more of your articles.
Hey, I'm excited because I'm wrapping up a show with Joey G.
Big deal. We got 3 on board.
Hey, I think we got up to 8 or 9.
Yeah.
On it. And I'll send you the numbers of how many tuned in and what the stats were on it. We did our show. Our 10th show that we did was with Anya Ramirez, and throughout the 2.5 hours, we had 355 people tuned in, and we had as many as 25 viewing at one point in time. Now, granted, Red brings a draw on herself, and I bring some people, but I know I'm not as good looking at that, and so I understand and respect that. Hey.
No, absolutely. No, it's all about having fun, enjoying the the whiskey, the cigars. The discussion is incredible. The information is incredible, and whoever gets a chance to watch your podcast, they're only going to benefit from it. Reading the Whiskey Network magazine, it's whiskey.network.net. It's free to subscribe. All you do is punch in your email address, and boom, you're subscribed, and it goes to your email inbox on the first of every month. And there's the weekly barrel report that comes out on every Friday. So it's a lot of information, and it's all up-to-date information on everything that's going on up to and including that week in the whiskey world.
Yep.
So
yeah, and I've subscribed to it for a number of years now, and when I talked to Bill and he said, okay, yeah, we want you to write for us, go ahead and submit a sample article, and they wanted to publish it. I was like, I was excited. I was dancing around, and you saw how excited I was when I saw it published. I was just like, hell yeah.
For me, I was like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is going to be a learning process, and as much knowledge as you have on board already, you're gonna continue to learn. It's a never-ending learning process. There's just never-ending information out there on both worlds, cigars and whiskey, and that just fascinates me, and that's what keeps me engaged.
Oh yeah, I told my kids, the day that I stop learning, go ahead and pull the plug.
Exactly.
Pull the plug. The day that I stop learning, pull the plug, because I'm done.
Always something new to learn. But I really appreciate you having me on the podcast tonight. And sorry, Ash Red couldn't be with us. Hopefully she's enjoying her vacation.
Nope, I appreciate it. She was excited when I told her that you were going to come on the show, right. and said, well, we're going to have him back so I can talk with him too. So,
Anytime, absolutely. I love the discussion tonight. I'm still sitting here mind blown at the amount of information that you provided us and shared with us, and that's exactly it. And not just sharing the whiskey, but sharing your knowledge about the whiskey, so that other people can come to appreciate what they're sipping on more.
It's all fun, and I love it. I love sharing. I learn so much every single day. Learn from people like you. Learn from everybody around. It doesn't matter if someone's been only drinking whiskey for a couple of years or only smoking cigars for a couple of years. I learn from everybody, and that's what it's all about. It's all about the connections and the relationships that we make. So everybody, please make sure that you follow Joe. Click on him up here at the top. I put the whiskey bourbon Scotch Enthusiasts sitting there. Make sure that you go out and follow them. Go to the whiskynetwork.com or .net.
.net. Whiskynetwork.net.
Whiskynetwork.net. Subscribe to the newsletter. You'll get the newsletter in every week. You'll get the magazine. I believe it's a monthly magazine every month. You're going to get a lot of good information, and you're going to be able to see my brother Joe's articles. You're going to see my articles in there, and so many other great articles. And just support these guys because I love them. They're my brothers and my sisters, and you support me, you're supporting them, and I appreciate that. So
cheers, brother.
Cheers. Yeah, I got a little bit left in there, so cheers.
Bottoms up.
Appreciate you coming on.
Anytime.
And as we always close this out, I always close it out by telling everybody to explore the pairings, because there's something for everyone.
Absolutely. And you'll be on the Great Lakes Smoke Show October 11th, I believe it is.
October 11th, I think is what you said. Yeah, and I've still got to find the Joseph Magnus cigar malts.
Let me know. I could send you a sample, and definitely bring on Ash Red too.
Oh yeah, she's looking forward to it too.
Awesome.
So we're looking forward to that. That one's it's already in the calendar.
Awesome.
All right, brother.
All right, we'll see you.
Take care. Right. Good night, everybody.